right, Spring Break College Football Show, Monday, July 6th. Hope everyone had a phenomenal long weekend. This is, of course, your favorite ball knower's favorite ball knowing show. We are 54 days away from the Aer Lingus Classic, our first breath of college football for the 2026-27 season. And on today's show, we are going to be talking surprise teams in college football. I have picked one team from each Power 4 conference to discuss. I'll let you know what criteria I follow when choosing said teams. And I've also got a couple groups of teams I didn't put on my list but felt worth mentioning. One group is going to be teams I don't consider to be surprises, despite many around the world being comfortable throwing them in that category. And I've got another group of teams that I think are going to be better, but not to the point of being a surprise, sleeper, contender, playoffs, conference title, whatever you want to call it. So we'll talk all that. We'll send you on your merry way, and we'll get 1 week closer to fall camp, the start of the college football season, everything that brings us life here at the Spring Break College Football Show. Now, I want to take care of some housekeeping at the top. I have decided to kill SB and the SWC for now. Now, if you're saying, what the hell is SB and the SWC? Yeah, there's one 15-minute clip out there of it. I don't blame you. It was Spring Break in the Southwest Conference. It was going to be our Thursday show that we did here. And it was going to be talking everything Texas football. The Longhorns, the Aggies, the Red Raiders, the Bears, the Mustangs, the Horned Frogs, the Cougars. I think that's all of them. Basically, I moved to Texas and I was like, we're going to do a Texas show. I'm killing it for now. I'm in between jobs right now. Just left my last one, start my new one tomorrow. And just a lot of changes to try and throw more than one show in a week. I keep teasing it. I keep talking about it. I'm just not going to do it right now. We might bring it back during the season if we feel like it's worth it. But also things are going well enough here with the college football show on its own that I don't think we're going to be missing out on too much by just doing one show a week through the off season and then start to pick things up when football's actually back. So that's the only other housekeeping I've got for now. So let's get into today's conversation. Again, we're talking surprise teams for the upcoming season. But before we get to those teams, I want to talk about the teams I wouldn't qualify as surprises for 2026. You know, if you've ever watched a second of this show, you'll know that USC isn't a surprise team for me this season. I think this is the best team Lincoln Riley has had in Southern Cal. It's also, to me, one of the best 10 rosters in the sport. The schedule isn't easy. You have to play Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, Washington, and Penn State. So maybe the surprise would be getting through all of that unblemished, but I think their talent is on par or better than just about all the teams they'll face. To me, if you're going to be surprised by USC's success this year, then you just haven't been paying attention to what they've been building there the last few seasons. And you're also still clinging on to the same lazy narrative surrounding Lincoln Riley since he left OU. I just don't see that as a sleeper to me. Staying in the Big Ten, I also wouldn't be surprised if Washington is flirting with the playoffs in 2026. You know, it's a 9-win team from last year. They returned the 15th most production in the sport. Really talented quarterback, strong offensive line, revamped good defense under Ryan Walters. And their schedule also lines up for them to be, at worst, a one-loss team come November. Now, once they get to November, they have to play Penn State, Indiana, and Oregon. So sure, I'd be surprised if they got through that unscathed, but the playoff talk up to that point should be anything but shocking based on what they accomplished last year and the talent they have coming back. I also don't think that Florida is a surprise team this season. I thought it was one of the best 15 to 20 rosters in the sport last year, and the shakiest parts of that group, that being the quarterback and the head coach, are no longer around. John Sumrall brings a really high, sturdy floor as a head coach, and I think Ben Faulkner and Aaron Philo will bring a sturdy floor to this offense. There's just a lot of consistency coming from other destinations, essentially. That foundation should allow the talent that is littered throughout the roster to reach new heights almost immediately. You know, kind of like USC, Florida's schedule isn't pretty, but their talent should be on par with just about everyone they face in 2026, making a push for playoff contention not surprising in my eyes, at least. And then lastly, I won't be surprised if Penn State is creeping up on the playoffs in year one under new head coach Matt Campbell. all you got to do is take a look at the team schedule and say, like, yeah, that's a playoff contender. They got 3 games, USC, Michigan, and Washington, that will decide this team's fate. If they win 1 or 2 of them, it'll be nearly impossible to keep you out of the playoffs. Will this be the most talented team in the world? No. But kind of like how things played out for Indiana in 2024, I think the schedule gods aligned perfectly for Matt Campbell to hit the ground running in 2026 and crack the playoff conversation early in his tenure. Very similar to Indiana, a couple years ago. Matt Campbell brought all of his guys in from Iowa State. Curt Cignetti brought in all of his guys from James Madison. Really light schedule. Played a lot of the bottom tier teams in the Big Ten. And by the end of the regular season, it's like, hey, they're a Big Ten team with 1 or 2 losses. Are you really going to keep them out of the college football playoffs? I don't think so. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if Penn State is a title contender. That's surprising. Playoffs, no. I've got eyes. I look at their schedule. I know who they play. So those are the teams that, to me, aren't surprises in 2026. I guess all 4 of them, I guess you could tell me, like, yeah, if they're national title contenders, that's surprising. Maybe not USC, just because I'm a ball knower. But like Washington, Florida, Penn State, if they're creeping toward title contention, that'd be the surprise. Playoffs, to me, that's not surprising at all. Being atop their conference leaderboards, that's not surprising to me at all. I've also got some surprise teams that I didn't put on my final list because I just don't think there is enough going on for them to get over the hump immediately. It might be a little bit of a slower burn before they get things humming at full gear. And Oklahoma State was the first one that came to mind. I love the head coach. I love the quarterback. And I do believe a lot of holes on that roster will be filled by guys that followed Eric Morris over from North Texas. I just don't see them making a big enough of a leap from where they were a season prior. I think they were, 2-10, 1-11, winless. They were really bad. I don't see them going from that to all of a sudden being one of the better teams in the Big 12. They also have a really tough non-conference game against Oregon that I just feel like is kind of a momentum killer. You could feel really good about where things are going, and then you face one of the 5 best teams in the country. They smush you, and you go, oh, where'd all the fun go? I think things are going to get better at Oklahoma State. I just don't know if it's going to be immediately. I'd also throw Kansas State on that list for a slightly different reason. I think that the pairing of Colin Klein and Avery Johnson is either going to be one of the most exciting things that we watch on a football field next year or a colossal failure. Aggie fans don't seem too upset that Klein is no longer calling plays for Marcel Reed and the Texas A&M offense. And we've also yet to see Avery Johnson really string together consistent play the last few seasons. I think Marcel Reed is a more talented quarterback than Avery Johnson. But I also know that Marcel Reed was really inconsistent and inefficient in Colin Klein's offense last year. Now going to the Big 12, Colin Klein's offense should have some easier time against, not playing against SEC defenses every week. But if Avery Johnson isn't consistent, then I think you're going to run into the same issues you had last year. So I think it has the potential to be a really fun and exciting partnership, but I could also just see the world where they aren't the best fit for each other in 2026, and their season never really gets off the ground because of it. So those are 2 teams that I don't see them making the jump in 2026. And man, for some reason, I just cannot buy into the South Carolina hype either. I think they have some of the best athletes in the sport. They return the 5th most production in college football, but none of those star athletes have proven to be star football players, at least on a consistent enough of a basis. And I also count 6 teams on their schedule that I think are better than the Gamecocks. Even stealing a few of those would still be what I'd consider an underwhelming season. South Carolina, to be a surprise football team, it's 10-2, it's 9-3, it's 11-1. Like, to me, that is surprising. 7-5, 8-4. It's better than where they were a season prior, but it's not playoff contender, SEC contender, title contender surprise that we are trying to discuss here. I was down on that group heading into last year, and I still am today. And last but not least, while I think Virginia Tech is certainly in for better days under James Franklin, I just don't see it coming together immediately. Schedule's not too nice for them. They have to play 5 of the 7 best teams in the ACC, and their 3 toughest opponents are all on the road: Miami, Clemson, and SMU. Again, a team that I think will be much better in 2026 and kind of will slow burn into being a force in the ACC just not one that's going to automatically be contending in the conference in 2026. So those are the 4 teams that like I considered. I almost wanted to make this list like 8 teams, 8 surprise teams in college football. But when I started writing out about them, it's like, yeah, but they're just, I don't think any of those 4 teams were going to be sitting here in November being like, wow, they're playing for a conference title in 2027. Very likely. 2026, I just don't see it. It feels a little premature. We're going to take our first ASMR break of the show. A little thirsty. It's hot out, man. I live in Texas, as I mentioned. I have not been prepared or equipped for the heat like it's been. You know, we're sitting here in the early parts of July. I still got months of this stuff, man. I don't know if you can tell. I got a little bit sunburnt. Man, yeah, it's hot. But anyways, taking a break to ask you all to please continue your support for this show. If you are listening or watching, you're already doing so. So shout out to you. You're being a good friend. If you are watching on YouTube and this is your first time here, I'm Spring Blake. It's a college football show. 2 + 2 = 4. If you're here and you like what you see, you like what you hear, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your shows, leave a 5-star review. Support me there as well. YouTube and social media is definitely where I try to get things going the most. So if you want to follow us over there, all the handles are going to be at Spring Blake CFB. That is TikTok. That is Instagram. That's the YouTube channel as well. Another good week on social media. And we didn't even do a lot of content toward the end of the week because it was the 4th of July weekend. But Instagram is up another 50 followers. TikTok, we just crossed 1,300. Some videos are doing really well there. This has been the most consistent growth that we've had in the almost year that I've been doing this. And the fact that it's happening in the off season makes me feel really good about where we'll go during the regular season. So again, I'm just taking this time to thank you if you're already supporting us, to plead to you to continue supporting with a follow, with a subscription. You know, I don't charge anything. I don't ask you to pay attention to every single thing that I post or publish, but if you just hit a follow, if you just hit a subscribe, if you like the content when you see it, hit a like, hit a comment, all that stuff continues our growth here. And yeah, I love doing this. I'd love for this to be the new job that I was taking over. But, you know, maybe one of these days it'll be the case. Thank you, guys. I always have to say it every show. And after every time I say it, I'm like, God, you're really sappy. But I do really appreciate it, so it's worth saying. All right, so we've talked about all the teams that aren't going to be on the list so far. But before we get to the ones that I did pick, again, one team from each Power 4 conference, I think it's important for me to define my criteria for what makes a team a sleeper or a surprise team in college football in my eyes. And I don't know if it's any of these specific things, like one, you need to have A, B, and C, but rather it's kind of like a blend of a few of them happening at once. The first one is what I'd call the Cignetti gene. And that's having a new coaching staff with a track record of hitting the ground running and you know, having a head coach that's either bringing his core group of players with him or he's joining a program that has a known ability to recruit and retain talent. Obviously, Curt Cignetti, as the Cignetti gene, is the first one that comes to mind. He is a guy that took a lot of his JMU players with him to Indiana, and he's a coach that hit the ground running at Elon. He's a guy that hit the ground running at JMU, so he gets to Indiana. He hits the ground running. Lane Kiffin is another guy that comes to mind at LSU right now. He's not going to make the list as a sleeper because at LSU, you're never a sleeper. You're a perennial contender because you're LSU. But he's a guy that has a track record of hitting the ground running. And while he didn't bring a ton of guys with him from Ole Miss to LSU, LSU is one of those brands that is known to recruit and retain talent at a very high level. So I don't think he's ever going to, you know, it's not going to be a slow burn there for him to hit the ground running with the Tigers. So that's the first thing I look for. I also think you can benefit from having a lot of continuity going your way on the roster. You know, in this era of football where there's teams that are transferring out half a roster, a third of the roster on a yearly basis, if you're a team that is retaining a lot of talent, I think you're going to be able to catch less experienced or those fresher teams off guard. And then I think it's even better if you make some small enhancements in the offseason to push things over the top. Like, okay, we were a really good team on defense last year, but we really had a tough go with the quarterback position. Well, we just brought in this new quarterback from the portal, or we made these additions to the offensive line. If you are just sprinkling in those portals on top, I think you're in a really good spot there. So that's another thing I look for. And then last, which is probably the luckiest part of the equation, do you have a schedule that works in a way to where you could be a 1 or a 2-loss team, hell, even be undefeated by the time the middle of November rolls around? You could probably have this last one and probably qualify as a sleeper team on it alone. But those are the main things I look for when trying to qualify a team as a surprise contender for 2026. Schedule that works in your favor, the Curt Cignetti gene, where you're just a new coaching staff at a new program that's known to hit the ground running. You bring your guys with you, or you have a program already in place that is known to recruit and retain talent. And do you have a team that just has a lot of continuity going for you? I think returning production is huge in this sport. It's not always the case. We think of last year, there were some teams that were utter failures that returned the most production in college football, Penn State, Clemson, to name a few. But those are the few. Those are the few things. So with all that in mind now, let's get to the topic of today's show. We're how many minutes in? We're about 16 minutes in, and we're just getting to the topic. We are talking sleeper teams in the college football season. I have taken one team from each Power 4 conference, and I have picked them, tabbed them as my potential surprise team for the upcoming season. And let's start off hot with it, because I do not think people are ready for the potential UCLA playoff talks that we'll be having by the middle of this college football season. So Bob Chesney was anointed head coach after a few successful seasons at James Madison, and much like his predecessor in Curt Cignetti, I think there's going to be some very early playoff buzz in his new Big Ten destination. UCLA returns the 5th most production on offense. It's a top 30 group in returning production on defense. Nico Iamaleava, with his antics from last summer well in the rearview mirror, had a relatively solid season despite a bad year overall for the Bruins. He completed 65% of his passes, had 2,400 all-purpose yards, 17 total touchdowns. It's a pretty solid quarterback situation for a new head coach to walk into with. And while I won't say that this roster is great, elite at any other position, I don't think there's a glaring weakness on the roster either. I think it's serviceable across the board, offense and defense. And so with that continuity on the roster, a really talented quarterback at the helm, and a coaching staff that has a track record of hitting the ground running, you're checking a lot of boxes in my book. And then here's the kicker for UCLA. Their schedule lines up pretty perfect for them to steamroll into some early success, playoff hype, all that stuff. They've got a very light non-conference schedule. They avoid playing Indiana and Ohio State. They get to play Purdue, Michigan State, Maryland, and Wisconsin, 4 of the worst teams in the Big Ten. They'll have to prove their worth. The prove-it games to me are Minnesota and Illinois. Those are the two that, okay, are you going to be a contender or not? You got to win or split those games. They'll take the Oregon loss on the chin, but all of that kind of rolls itself into being a potential one-loss football program by the middle of November. Now, once they're there, the dream probably dies because they finish the season against Michigan and USC. But we're talking about surprise teams, not playoff certainties. If UCLA is walking into winter as a 9-1 football team, and there is a roadmap for them to do so, then that certainly qualifies as a surprise in the sport and something that will be one of the more intriguing storylines in college football. So that's why I've got the UCLA Bruins as my surprise team in the Big Ten. I want to go back real quick and just talk about that schedule for a second, because I think I made it a little mouthy. So UCLA's schedule, what they've got. So they start the season at Cal. Really fun game if you think about it. Tosh Lupoi taking over from being Oregon's DC, now the new head coach at Cal. It's a really fun, how's that game going to go? If UCLA gets past it, I think they should. You then go San Diego State, Purdue, Maryland. So that's a potential 4-0 start. Then they travel to Oregon. Now they get to travel to Oregon off a bye week, so maybe they got a little, extra fight and a little extra punch for them. But they most likely lose that game. So okay, now you're 4-1. Then you've got Wisconsin, Michigan State, Nevada, Minnesota. Again, Minnesota and Illinois are the prove-it games. You know, you probably by that point, you're going to be staring at UCLA and saying you're what, 7-1? You're a 7-1 football team at the start of November. Then you've got to play at Minnesota and home for Illinois. Those are like the level up games. You take both of those and you're like, holy shit, we're 9-1 with 2 weeks to go. Even if you're not, say you split them, you go 8-2. Okay, the playoff hopes are probably dead, but you're still a ranked football team in the middle of the season. If you go into Michigan and upset the Wolverine, or you get your rivalry weekend against USC and take down the Trojans, all of a sudden you split one of those, you're a 10-2 football team. In year one under Bob Chesney, 10-2 with at least one top 25 win at the end of the year. As a playoff team, I'm just saying, there's a path. There is a certain path for UCLA to be one of the stories, the surprises of the 2026 season. So that is my team in the Big Ten. Let's take ourselves out of the West Coast and head down south, because the closer and closer we get to this college football season, the more I'm talking myself into TCU as the sleeper team in the Big 12. I really like the changes that Sonny Dykes made on offense this offseason. He brought in UConn's offensive coordinator Gordon Sammis and Harvard quarterback Jaden Craig to replace the ineffective duo of Kendall Briles and Josh Hoover. TCU's offense was messy last year. They ran for fewer than 4 yards per carry. They had the 6th most turnovers through the air. Sammis, meanwhile, operated an offense at UConn that had the fewest turnovers in the country and one that ran for more than 5 yards a carry. And Jaden Craig, while at Harvard, lower level of competition, he's got a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio over the last 2 seasons. And certainly, hopefully, that duo will bring a better efficiency down to Fort Worth. Both will obviously have to elevate their performance against heightened competition, but I really think that duo can do some real damage with everything else that's already in place. Jeremy Payne is a fantastic tailback. He'll be the focal point, the guy that this offense runs through in 2026. And I think Jordan Dwyer is a really talented wide receiver, a big playability guy that works well with Jaden Craig's cannon arm. Sammis is also a former offensive lineman. I love my offensive play callers when they got an offensive line background. I do think he can get this starting lineup in a sturdy enough of a position to be competitive, balanced, efficient, all of that stuff. The Horned Frogs also returned 6 starters on defense. They have one of the best safeties in the nation in Jamel Johnson and have some high potential guys at corner. And while their schedule is one of the harder ones to play in the Big 12, the timing of the games will allow the Horned Frogs to steamroll into some early success. TCU should be sitting at 4-0 when they host BYU on October 3rd, but that game is probably their only one against top 25 competition until the regular season winds down. They also have a really nice travel schedule. They leave the state of Texas just once over the final 9 weeks of the year. You know, they start the season in Ireland in the Aer Lingus Classic. Once they get back to the States, like I said, just one road trip outside the state of Texas over the final 9 weeks of the year. The way that their schedule works out, at worst, I think you're looking at a 1 or a 2-loss team with just 2 weeks to go in the regular season. Now, they'll have to take care of business when they get there, and business is hosting Utah and traveling to Texas Tech. But by the time we get there, we'll be talking plenty about TCU in what's a get-right year for Sonny Dykes and company as a surprise team to come out of the Big 12. It is a massive year for TCU. You know, they made it to a national championship game, back-to-back 9-win season, which is really impressive, but in conference play, they're floating barely above 500. You kind of need to take that next step. They've watched other teams in the Big 12 stake their claim as like, oh no, we're the actual best teams in the conference. Big year for TCU if they want to right the ship. And I think the schedule plays out fairly for them to do so. So that is my team, my sleeper team in the Big 12. We are going to take one more break here. Oh, I need another sip of water. You know what I'm realizing too as we're recording this show? I'm very lightheaded right now. We're recording mid-afternoon. I don't think I've had much of anything to eat today. So we're feeling a little lightheaded. We're also really cracked out on caffeine. And you know why we are? We had a bucked up energy drink at the gym today. 300 milligrams of caffeine in those bad boys. And while we were talking about that, we're going to take our second break to please support us, support Bucked Up. I don't know if that's the right way to start this, but frankly put, we're a Bucked Up show here in the Spring Break College Football Studio. I have joined the Bucked Up Ambassador team over the last couple of weeks, and all that really means is that I promote Bucked Up products. If you guys purchase it or click links, I get commission, I get support, and we continue to grow this show just even more than we had hoped to just by engagement and followers and all that stuff. We try and make some money over here at the Spring Break College Football Show. If you are someone that has a healthy lifestyle, you're physically active, you go to the gym, start using Bucked Up to help with your daily routine. It's not just energy drinks. They have got collagen, they got creatine, they got pre-workout, they've got gear to wear while working out and exercising. Anything that you need for your health fitness journey, Bucked Up has to offer. You are going to see a link in the description of this video on YouTube, in the description of the podcast episode on Spotify and Apple. You'll also find it at the links in my social media. If you click that link, even just clicking the link supports this show. There's different commission tiers, and a lot of that is based off of how many times people like those or click those links. So click the link if you're there. If you are interested in purchasing something, use code SPRINGBLAKE1 at checkout. While clicking that link, you get 20% off your next order, which is really cool. It's a good way to support me, a good way to support the show, and you also get 20% off your next purchase. So shout out to Bucked Up for letting me be a part of the ambassador program. I said I'm mostly sticking with the energy drinks. I got a pre-workout coming in the mail, though, that I'm excited about. And yeah, shout out to Bucked Up, being our first partner here at the Spring Break College Football Show. All right, we have got two more teams to discuss. We've knocked out the Big Ten. We've knocked out the Big 12. Let's go to the SEC. I think it is really hard to find a sleeper team in the Southeastern Conference because it's littered with talent. Littered with talented programs, talented football teams. It's really hard to sleep on any one team in the Southeastern Conference. But let me tell you why I landed on Auburn as my pick to make a sizable jump in 2026. I absolutely love this coaching staff. Alex Golesh comes in from South Florida after leading an offense that tore through college football in 2025. They averaged the third most yards per game in the sport, the fifth most points per game in the sport, and the fifth best red zone efficiency numbers in the game. And Golesh hasn't just been doing it against the G6 teams of the world. He's got a strong track record that he's bringing with him to the Plains. He was Tennessee's primary offensive play caller in 2021 and 2022. That first year, the Vols finished top 10 in both yards and points per game, and in 2022, they led the country in both those metrics. Even last year, his Bulls found 400 yards of total offense in their upset victory over the Florida Gators. All that's to say, I think he's going to do just fine on that side of the ball in his return to the SEC. He's got his quarterback, Byram Brown, with him, a really deep tailback room, and a passing game that makes life easy on its receivers. And maybe the biggest win for Auburn this offseason was convincing DJ Durkin to stick around as their defensive coordinator, after he kept Auburn competitive in a handful of games they had no business being involved in last year. They had Georgia on the ropes at one point, held them to 20 points in that game. They had one possession losses to Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Alabama. Those are four SEC playoff teams that Auburn was there with down the wire. You know, the Tigers had their share of problems last season, but I wouldn't say many of them came from that side of the football. And while for 2026 they lost some talent up front, I really like this linebacker room and think that the group overall should be in a really sound space, especially playing alongside an offense that's going to put up plenty of points on the board. You know, last year, you had to keep, teams below 24 points if you wanted to give Auburn's offense a chance to do enough to win. This year, I don't think you don't have to be a bad defense. I don't think you have to be a great one for you to be a better football team overall because of how potent the offense will be. So if the offense catches fire like history says it will, and the defense doesn't fall off a cliff, I think you've got a sneaky Auburn Tiger football team in 2026. Being in the SEC does you no favors on the calendar, but for what it's worth, they also do play the easiest schedule in terms of SEC teams. If they can start plucking off early wins against the Floridas and the Tennessees of the world, you could roll into mid-October with a lot of momentum to try and stake your claim as the surprise team of the Southeastern Conference. You've got a few teams that could be making that claim. Florida comes to mind. We already talked about them early on the show. They want to be like the new team. Tennessee is still floating around there too. South Carolina, we mentioned. Kentucky's got a new head coach. Arkansas has got a new head coach. Like, there are plenty of teams in that conference that are going to try and push into that tier 1 or tier 2 of the conference. Auburn's schedule, the easiest in the SEC. Like I said, you got to get through some early teams, Florida, Tennessee, to prove your worth. And then you got, Alabama at one point. They played Georgia. I know they've got Texas A&M. Like, they've got a tough schedule. But if you were to tell me that there's going to be a team in college football that just goes nuclear on offense and all of a sudden they've catapulted themselves into conference title, playoff contention, my mind goes to Auburn first. So that is my team in the SEC. Now to the ACC. Finishing off the show. We are going to dig deep into the bag as we head to the ACC. I don't fully believe this one myself. It flat out stinks, honestly, but let me try to paint the picture as to why Florida State could be the surprise team in the ACC this season. So we all know the sad state of affairs happening down in Tallahassee right now. They were 5-7 last year, 2-10 the year before, all after a perfect 13-0 regular season had them feeling like they had reclaimed the throne in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Flash forward a few years later, Mike Norvell is now a dead man walking. He was only kept around this past offseason because of the $53 million tag attached to his contract buyout. And that has left a premier college football brand stuck in mud with no immediate fix in sight. But what if I told you that the fix everyone is searching for might come from not changing anything at all? That is because I think Florida State was one of the unluckiest teams in college football last year. They started incredibly hot, took down Alabama in week 1, outscored their first 3 opponents 143-13. This team was ranked 7th nationally early on in the regular season. But then came 4 straight one-possession losses, 2 of them being at the hands of top 25 competition, and the wind was taken out of their sails from that point on. They finished conference play at 2-6, but that was despite outgaining their opponents by an average of 76 yards per game. And they also finished the year with a -5 turnover margin. One-possession losses, a negative turnover margin, all while having sizable yards per game advantage. That tells you FSU was much better than their record indicates. Those are things that usually correct themselves to the mean. One possession losses, those can flip on a yearly basis. Turnover margin, that can flip on a yearly basis, especially when we have proof last year that offensively they gained 76 more yards per game than their opponents in 2026 against in-conference opponents. So all of that tells you that FSU was much better than their record indicates. And on paper, I think the roster has more than enough talent to right the ship. They should have one of the 10 to 12 best run games in college ball, 4 capable tailbacks sharing the load, a mix of returning guys, transfers. It's a really good group. Out wide, Deuce Robinson, Mekhi Danzy, Landon Thomas lead what is easily one of the 10 best receiving rooms in the country. And they are for sure above ACC standards on both sides of the trenches. Now, metrics and me reading off a depth chart aren't going to solve this thing alone. Ashton Daniels is going to need to be a steady presence at quarterback, and Mike Norvell is going to have to prove that he's capable of building and leading a cohesive football team again. And those are 2 massive asks, but I'm just saying, there was a lot that didn't go the Noles' way last season, and if I'm to find a group in the depths of the ACC that I think could make a push for the top, I see more than enough reason to talk myself into that being the team down in Tallahassee. So the Florida State Seminoles, my surprise team for the 2026 season out of the ACC. I don't fully believe it. You can tell I don't really have a ton to back up with it. But in the ACC, to me, I'm not picking anybody from the top 2 tiers of the conference, Like Miami is tier 1. In tier 2, I would say it's a mix of SMU. It's a mix of Clemson. Who else is in there that I would say is in there? There's one more team that SMU, Clemson, Miami's in tier 1. Virginia was really good last year. It was, to me, down to NC State or Florida State. I just think Florida State has a more talented roster, and that's why I picked them as the team to make the jump. I just think they were unlucky. I was pretty down on them, but then you think about that. Like if you were 4 one-possession losses, 4 straight, which just flat out kills any momentum you could have in a regular college football season. I don't care how good or how bad you are. You lose 4 straight one-possession games. One was in overtime. 2 were, I think, 3-point losses. There was a 7-point loss in there. That kills all momentum. You were also outgaining your in-conference opponents by an average of 76 yards a game. You finished the year with a negative turnover margin. All of those things are really correctable just by human nature. And so I think, they don't have the easiest conference schedule in the world, but we're taking a flyer. We're taking a flyer in the ACC. But those are my 4 teams: Florida State, Auburn, UCLA, and TCU. Those are my sleeper teams. That is going to be today's show. Thank you guys for listening, watching, supporting. Again, the socials at SpringBlakeCFB. Go throw me a bone there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. 5-star review for the podcast. I'll be back next week. We might flip the script, do some disappointments, teams that are going to take a step back in 2026. I think there's more than plenty teams to discuss in that regard. But hey, by that point, we're in the middle of July. We've just got a few more weeks until fall camp, and then we're just going to hit this thing rolling. So thank you guys. I love you. I appreciate you. I will talk to you soon. Peace.